folks, today's tutorial is all about stenciling, and in this tutorial I'm going to explain what products you need to get it right, or certainly help ease the way, what can go horribly wrong, and how to apply two paints at once to give a different effect. So first of all, let's look at the quality of the stencils that we're using, because that can make a big difference. And you'll pretty much know the quality by the price that you pay. And this one here, I used to stock these. These are made by Stamperia, but I still have, I don't stock these anymore, but I still have some of this quality, and they're bendable stencils. And I keep them because they're very good value, but they are made of a much thinner acetate than the others, and that can create problems, but I'll go through that with you in a minute. Then there are much better quality ones, and you can feel, you can't feel, but you can hear and see maybe the thickness of this one towards that. This one is going to be much easier for you to use, because all these little pieces here, they're not going to bend back as easy and break and allow the paint in underneath as they will with this one. Now, when I first started stenciling, I always only used masking tape to hold the stencil in place. And there are two things that make your stenciling work or not. And the first one of those is making sure that the stencil stays in place. So I don't use masking tape anymore. For that reason, is that I don't believe it stays in place, and I'm always having to hold down extra bits where the tape only has the main body of the stencil in place. So I don't use it for that, and I also don't use it because I normally stencil on a freshly painted piece. And fresh paint easily comes off with masking tape. No matter how low tack you seem to buy, it still seems to come off. So I much prefer to use this. This is a repositionable spray. You can buy many different brands of it. This just happens to be the one that I stock on shabby.ie, and it's really good. So I will turn that around. I'll spray this on the back of my stencil, and I'll give it a couple of minutes just to dry in, and then I will place it down on my project. And I'll press it down completely like that, and every single bit, all these little bits here, and even on the cheap stencil, all these little bits are firmly stuck down. So you don't have to worry about holding it in place, about having 10 hands to move as you're trying to stencil. That does all that for you, a repositionable spray. Then it just lifts up. It doesn't mark your paintwork, it doesn't mark the surface, it simply lifts up. Now, the one thing you do have to remember is that back side will stay sticky. It doesn't just disappear as soon as you take it off. So when you are storing your stencils, this is how I store mine, in a pocket folder like this, and each one normally would have its own pocket. But when it comes to using the repositionable spray, you can see it's still a little bit tacky on the back. So I don't put it in the pocket, I just sit it on top of the pocket like that. And it's still perfect. Protected, easy to pull off when I want to use it again. So that's how I store my stencils. We'll get on to the cleaning of them. As you can see, I'm not a great one for cleaning them because I don't want to break them, but I'll go through that with you in a minute. So that's how I store them, and that's why I use the repositionable spray. So that's our first thing. That's our different quality stencils, how we store them, and why we use repositionable spray as opposed to masking tape. Now, the next thing I want to discuss with you is what else you need. You need a brush, a stencil brush. Don't try and stencil with a normal paintbrush because it normally has pointy edges, even at the side if it's flat. You need a stubby brush like this that will hold the paint just at the bottom of the brush. Now, these are a set of 3 bristle brushes. These are my brush of choice purely because they last so much longer. I'm not a great one for looking after my brushes, so I can just throw them in water and come back and wash them a couple of hours later. However, you can also use the stubby foam brushes, and I'll show you them now. Now let's move on to what paint you use. Stenciling is mainly done with a kind of a dry brushing technique. So don't use a really runny paint. I like acrylic paints, chalk paint, and I use milk paint by General Finishes. But pretty much any paint that you have in your stock will do. But I'll show you how to make sure that you don't overload your brush to start off with. Now, when we're going to put on two paints at once, I use a roller. The other time I will use a roller is when I'm doing a large surface. Like I'm doing a large, say 8:3 stencil on a coffee table. But I'll show you that when we move on to using two colours. Okay, so now let's get stenciling. I'm using a Daily Art repeat stencil here. And this one is quite interesting because it's about as inexpensive as I was speaking earlier on, and it's certainly not very thick quality, but it's not as flimsy as the other ones. Now I have used this quite a few times and it's still going strong because I always use it with the repositionable spray. Now I've sprayed the stencil on the back, I've placed it where I want it to go, and I want to show you this. Look at this, this is not going anywhere. This is totally stuck. So I have pressed it down, so there's nothing getting in underneath this stencil, and I don't have to worry about putting my hands anywhere. Now, what else do you need before you start stenciling? I'm going to use the bristle brush. I have just taken a little saucer here, saves you finding a plastic or a paper plate. An ordinary saucer, I've just covered it in tin foil, and when I'm finished, I can just throw the tin foil out. So it's a great little palette. And of course, you have to have your kitchen roll. So let's talk about loading the brush and unloading the brush. Loading the brush means how much paint you put on. Well, I put plenty of paint on to start with. I make sure that the brush is covered in paint like this. But then I take off a lot of it onto my kitchen roll, because you can easily apply more. What you don't want is to put on too much, because you can't take it off. So the brush is pretty much dry now, and now I'm going to apply it onto the piece. Now I'm doing this stencil on the side of a drawer. Recently, this is a very popular place to do some stenciling, and recently Upcycling Club member Laura Byrne-Daly did her first piece for sale, and she stenciled the side of the drawer like this, and I have to tell you, I was really impressed by this for a couple of reasons. The first one is, from a consumer's point of view, if I am buying a piece of furniture, it's little details like this that will win me over. Not because of the detail itself, but because it shows me that the person who has restyled that piece of furniture has paid an awful lot of attention to every detail, even down to finishing touches like that. And if she has put that much attention into finishing touches, I know she hasn't skimped on the preparation and the paint used on the piece. So bear this in mind. Your finishing touches say an awful lot about what kind of upcycler you are. Now, I'm not dabbing this down. I'm basically just letting the paint come off the brush rather than me forcing it off by forcing the brush down. There's no need to do that. Once you have enough paint on the brush, all you have to do is dab it like this and it will go on. Also, I have done these in classes where I have started off and then I let somebody else take over, and it looked very uneven because we all have different hand pressure. So don't allow someone else to take over halfway. If you're going to start it, you finish it as well. So I'm just going to keep going here until I have this whole piece covered. Then I will take it off, and I'm going to show you how easily the stencil comes off even with this spray on it. And let's see how easy this comes off. So I'm just going to lift it at the corner, and I'm going to pull it off like this. One hand. And there you go. Isn't that pretty nice? Okay, so I'm going to join this stencil up, finish off the rest of it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, I want to show you something about repeat stencils, and something very particular to this one. When you are going to line up a stencil to continue on like that, don't start there. You will never get the right gap. It'll always look like you started again. Go over the last one, and then you can continue on when you have it matched up. But this particular stencil, they come in pairs. They're up, like it's a mirror image of each other here. So I'm going to have to actually go over two to make this match up like that. And I'm going to stick it down again. Then I know this third one is going to match up exactly right. So watch for that. That's a real amateur mistake that you'll kick yourself afterwards if you have it all done and then you look at it and you think, oh no, this looks awful. So I'm going to press that down again. Actually, no, I have it slightly off there, which is good for my spray. Now this is going to leave a little gap here, but that's the very back of the drawer and that really doesn't matter. Press it down, and I'm going to continue on exactly the way I did. Load up the brush, tap it onto the kitchen roll, and continue on. And I'll show you it when it's done. I'm going to show you how to use a roller to apply paint into a stencil, and this time we're going to use two colours. Now the first time I did this I thought that they would run into each other, but they don't. So a small bit of paint on either side, get your roller, run it into it, back and forth, so you can see the colour on both sides. Then onto your kitchen roll, so you're taking a good bit of it off. And then we're going to roll it on. And I'm going to roll it on in different directions. Because if I just go up and down like that, one side will be gold, one side won't. I'm going to roll it in different directions like this. Okay? Now, because I've so little paint on there, this will be quite faded. If you would prefer a stronger colour in your stencil, wait till that is dry or dry it off with a hairdryer and then go again. Don't be tempted to put too much paint on in the first coat, because that's what will make it seep in underneath. I like stencils faded, so I'm going to leave it at that and dry it off. Now, before I take this off, because I know this is going to be quite muted, I want some of the areas to be stronger in gold. So I'm going to go back with my brush just over these areas here on the outside. This is where you could actually use third colour if you wanted. I'll say I'm just going to do a little bit of the gold on the tips of the edges like that. Just so you could just do it randomly. I often do that, it creates highlights. For now, for this one I'm just going to try on the outside, see what it looks like. If it's terrible, I just paint over it. Okay.